All right, everyone. Got an awesome guest here, Ryan Lampers. He carved some time out of his busy schedule, and when he's not on the mountain, to chat with us here and share a little bit about his lifestyle. I've been following Ryan for a while, and love all of his backcountry adventures. But what interested me even more was his family life and how he balances that when he's not chasing bear, elk, deer, and whatever else you chase up on the mountain. But Ryan, give a little brief intro for those that may not know you. Who are you, and what are you passionate about?
Okay, yeah. Well, first off, I really appreciate you having me on here. Yeah, I love getting to talk a little bit about not necessarily myself, but hunting. Hunting is one of those discussions that I'm always happy to have. So my name's Ryan Lampers. Gosh, passionate about hunting, fishing, outdoors. Obviously, my family, raising two young girls in a crazy world today. So we all have our challenges with that. I live in Montana, grew up in Washington State, spent 44 years in Washington State, and couldn't get out of there quick enough. Finally, was convinced by my wife that we could make it in Montana, and that's what we're doing. Um, Probably the best move I've ever made was just that was risking it all and coming here to the great state. And this is where we'll probably spend the rest of our days.
That's awesome. I've heard similar things, and it sounds like you need to get Dan out of Washington. Go get his wife convinced, Dan Staten, because I know
Try.
he's trying to
Yeah.
get out of there too.
I'm really surprised Dan hasn't just hopped up and over into Idaho at least. But
Hmm.
yeah, no, I think family first with Dan as well. And I think he's thought everything through. And he doesn't hunt the state of Washington much, but unfortunately he lives there now. He does live in probably the better part of the state
Hmm.
versus where I was growing up on the west coast there. So
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, that's awesome. I haven't personally been up to Montana. I'm planning on going up this year and checking it out, and I've just heard amazing things. It looks beautiful, big open country, and I was hoping to make it up to Big Sky, but wasn't able to this year. So that's pretty sweet. So talk to us here a little bit about first off, how did you get started in? I don't think I've ever heard your origin story of just the outdoors in general. Obviously, you grew up on the West Coast. It's a lot more outdoorsy than most places out east. But where did it all start for you?
started as a just a boy growing up with parents that love the outdoors. My dad, especially, he was a farm kid, with five brothers and sisters on a dairy farm. We're a Dutch family, so we come from Whidbey Island out there. Actually, that's where my folks grew up, and my dad was always just a nut when it came to fishing. Hunting, yes, but more bird hunting. It wasn't as much big game stuff. Now he grew up big game hunting, but it wasn't his probably his big passion, which is more fishing and bird hunting. So I grew up doing a ton of that. We probably did more pheasant, quail, chucker hunts than I don't know. I still have a hard time catching up on the big game hunts with as many bird hunts as I did in my youth. But we did that a lot in Washington, chasing chuckers, which was a real challenge. I'd say in some of the roughest environments. So that was a ton of fun. But my uncles hunted. My grandparents were both into fishing and all that outdoors, and so yeah, I was very fortunate to have a father who got me into it, and he was my mentor when I started out.
It's awesome. So you're not so much a bird hunter anymore. You're more big game nowadays.
No, you have to pick and choose, right,
Yeah.
Jonathan? You got to cut some things out, and fishing was my world for most of my life, and I've chopped a lot of that out to it's kind of taken a backseat to a lot of these big game pursuits that we're doing now, and I'd say in the last 15 years. But prior to that, it was a lot of bird hunting mixed with obviously deer and elk and all that stuff. But I had to kind of cut some of that stuff out, and unfortunately, I have three bird dogs, and so they're getting neglected. They're not getting the trips in, except for a few in December at this point when I'm not chasing deer, elk, bear, all the big game animals.
That's awesome. So you pretty much grew up in the outdoors, loving to hunt, the smaller game and fish. Did you do more fly fishing, or what was your kind of fishing that you were into?
Both. So I am not a purist in any form with anything outdoors. I love fly fishing. In fact, I guided fly fishermen for years and years and years. I guess 9 years altogether. Various trips from lakes to Alaska to Russia, and spent a lot of my time, working with guys, getting them to be better at fly fishing, whether that's two-handed rods, spay fishing, or just lake stuff and two-handed rods, or just single. That's that's been a big passion of mine, forever. And then, I kind of grew up on the other side of it, the bait world, which was my family business. In fact, my dad started out raised baits. That was his business after he got out of construction, and so he was pumping sand shrimp off the beaches of Washington, and that turned into a very large business, in fact, and it's still cranking out tons of bait over there. So definitely on that side as well. I took over that business for quite a few years. And so we sold bait up and down the coast, a lot of herring, sardines, anchovies, all those frozen type baits, and then sand shrimp, salmon roe, all the stuff. And that kept me busy, but definitely tried to make sure I never got too snobby when I got into the fly fishing world. That was one thing that definitely turned me off to it. I got so deep, in the guiding aspects of fly fishing, and especially doing these places like Russia. You get the high upper crust, and same with Alaska on a lot of those rivers. You get a very elitist attitude sometimes, and it was unfortunate. I try to avoid that, and it really turned me off to it for a while. As much as I love fly fishing, as I loved it back then, and I do today, the one thing that drives me crazy and makes me go the opposite direction is when I get around a bunch of snobs talking about this is the only way you do it, and you're less than a human if you do it this other way. And that is translated into bow hunting as well. I try not to be snobby. I love bow hunting, but I also love a good rifle hunt, muzzleloader hunt. Those are some of the hardest hunts that we take on and challenge ourselves with every year. It's definitely not some of the bow hunts. I feel like those are a lot easier. So I like to do both, and try not to be too much of an elitist.
Yeah, no, and I love that idea because there's so many different approaches to it. And the way that I, try and talk to people about it is just get outside. Like for me, unless you're torturing an animal, you know, um, I don't care how you go and fish. I don't care how you go shoot your bow. If you prefer a long bow over a compound, awesome. You've got more skill than me because,
Yeah,
but I like to reach out and touch things at 100 yards at tack.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what gets me happy, not just 40 yards with if you can hit 40 yards with a longbow, things like that. But it's all, I love what you're saying about not being an elitist because that can turn a lot of people off of getting outdoors and fly
yeah.
fishing. Like I am a terrible fly fisherman, but I love the action. I
Mm-hmm.
love, that even if you're not catching anything, seeing the fly sit on the water and then, casting it back and forth. I don't even know the terms, but the first time I caught a trout off a fly, I was like, okay, this is it. Like I might have cast 1,000 times before that, and I finally caught one, but
Yeah.
it's fun, and that's just what I want people to do is just to understand that even people like you that have had years and years and years of experience in the outdoors understand the importance of just having someone introduced to it. And if you'd rather do a rod and a reel, go that way. If you'd rather fly fish, go that way. And just getting outside. I love that.
Yeah, I think as sportsmen, it's easy to fall into these little cults, these little groups of people who get that elitist mentality. I see it in bow shops a lot. I avoid bow shops for the most part. There's some good ones, but
Yeah.
there's also some ones that I would never send a new hunter in there, because the holier than thou attitude that some of those guys spew in bow shops drives me bonkers. Same with fly shops. So I don't know why people go that direction. I feel like we're all in this just to have some fun, challenge ourselves if you want to, and have a good time. I don't poo-poo anybody who does it differently. I don't think anybody should.
Yeah.
Uh, there's guys that want to bow hunt, fantastic. There's guys that aren't there yet that or will never be there. They just prefer to rifle hunt. Great, do that. It gets all weird when you start saying I'm better than you because I do it this way.
Yep.
It's just,
Or I shoot this versus that. It's funny because so coming from the gun world of, Glocks versus SIG, right?
mm,
And then, you get into rifles and it's like, oh, I need this specialty round to do this and that. And then you go from that to the bows and it's like, oh, Hoyt versus Matthews versus PSE. I'm like, what about which one feels better to you? That's why there is a free market. That's why you do have so many options. So I love that approach, and that's pretty awesome. So before we delve, because I definitely want to talk to you about hunting and all that, but let's talk about maybe a little bit more of your home life, and things that you guys do at home, because I'm really interested. I have a terrible green thumb. It's more of a
mm,
brown thumb, especially here in Utah where it's so dry. And
mm,
this year they told us we couldn't water as much, and so my
mm.
garden didn't last very long. But what are some things that you do with your family, and then kind of why did you go this approach of? I mean, I'd consider it homesteading. You guys have some pretty awesome stuff going on there.
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, it's you know, getting the garden going, getting into that lifestyle, food preservation, chickens, all those hippy dippy things. I love every part of them. Food preservation has been something that I've been really passionate about. Anything from canning to freeze drying to dehydrating, and I feel like that is married to hunting as well as gardening. I like building my own meals for trips, and you grow, it doesn't have to be a monster garden. Just be a decent little, you could have a couple of, raised beds or whatever, and get some good greens and utilize that stuff in some meals that you're making for hunts. I think it just all kind of like goes together. So again, I will go back to my roots. My family, a bunch of farmers, dairy, yes, but the farming bug was in them, and growing things, growing trees, fruit orchards, crops, is all in their blood. So my father was heavily into gardening. Now, I can honestly say, when I was a kid and I had the Skycomas River parked over here that I could zip down to and go chase steelhead all day, or I could pick rocks and weeds in a garden. There was no contest. Like, I absolutely despised gardening. It didn't make sense to me. So my dad took care of the garden. I was anti-garden in my youth. And then, you wisen up when you get to 20 plus, somewhere in their 20s. I feel like you wisen up a little bit. And all those things that I had learned by watching him started making a lot more sense. So, I married my wife. We got a little place out in the town of Granite Falls, Washington, and had a great area for gardening. We started small, and it just grew into a monster. Turned a patch into a garden. Had a lot of berries and some fruit trees and things like that in our yard. We only had a half acre, but you can grow so much food on a half acre. It's unbelievable. You will need to get into food preservation methods if you want to try to, not throw 90% of your food away. And so we got into the gardening. It bit us good. I was really into it, growing everything I possibly could. I was growing things that I didn't even like to eat, um, but it kind of just got a hold of me, and I loved growing things. And then, from there, we had 20 years of incredible area to garden with the right climate, long growing seasons over there, very moderate temperatures, not big swings. Fast forward to where we are here in Montana, similar to what you have going on down there in Utah. It's very dry, hot summers. We get our first freeze often in 1st of September. So, peppers and tomatoes don't do real good unless you started them well in advance, or you need to ripen them up in your house or whatever. So a lot more challenges that we face here in Montana versus what we had in Washington State, for sure. And yet, they're all doable. They're all manageable. It's just how much time do you want to dedicate to it? So I've got a lot of plans, a lot of projects yet to tackle with the garden. Like this year, we have several boxes filled. I think I got 15 raised beds out there. We didn't go hog wild this year. I just had too many things going on with our businesses and hunting trips and things like that. But yeah, the gardening part of it is huge. It's a big part of our life, and getting my daughters to figure it out, know how to do it, know how to raise their own, grow their own, kill their own. I feel like it's just a good lifestyle. And then the food preservation part, we've been running dehydrators for years and years and years, and it's a great way to preserve greens. You can make these green powders for green drinks and smoothies and berries as well. So we'll dehydrate all these berries and then powder them and make these just mason jars full of raspberry powder, whatever. And it sounds a little like Betty Homemaker or whatever, but I love doing it. Like, it's one of my favorite things to do is just have all these mason jars full of now freeze dried foods or dehydrated foods or meals that I can just add water to. And so that's kind of what we do. We focus a lot on that. Our life revolves around food one way or the other.
I like it. I like it. And I would agree. It's something that's definitely not understood. I probably don't have freezers full of meat like you do. I'm not as successful or go on as many hunts, but I've got enough that was it a year ago or something like that when meat just started to spike in pricing, and I heard everyone at work talking about it, and I was like, what? And I realized we only buy meat for like big roasts or things like that for when we have family over. And even then we usually go to a local butcher and split a cow with someone, just because we love supporting local and everything like that. So I didn't notice it. And that was kind of where it kind of clicked for me. It was like, okay, I'm not the best gardener, food preservation, but I'd love to get into that eventually. I started building up my food stores a little bit more, and definitely the meat, prepping a little bit better so I could be more successful during the hunting season. All of those things are definitely overlooked. And I love that you get your kids involved in it as well. That's a big thing for me too, that the whole reason, well, one of the main reasons I started RedBeard Outdoors was because I was in an office setting where people just felt overwhelmed with just the 9 to 5, and then they go home, they have kids, and they feel like they can't do anything with kids. They love their kids, but they feel like they're kind of holding them back. And I love finding people like yourself that don't let that happen, and instead you take pride in teaching them these homemaker abilities or going out and hunting, which I love. When I've watched the videos, and I think it was last year's hunt where you had your wife and I think your oldest daughter on the hunt. And and more than anything, the point where you hear so many people that are like, okay, take the shot, take the shot, take the shot. And you were in her ear saying, if this isn't the one you want, you don't have to take it. And you were just so calm. And I felt like that gave her that better experience. And for children, that's huge. For mentorship in general, that's huge. So talk a little bit about that. How do you get to that where you want to share that with your kids, for people that maybe feel like their kids kind of hold them back during hunting season? How do you get your kids involved? What's the way that you do that without forcing them?
Yeah. And that was, we had kids a little later in life, obviously. Gosh, I'm 48. I think I'm 48 right now. So, my oldest is 13. And then my youngest is 7. So, great ages. My oldest daughter, like you mentioned in that hunt a couple years ago, that was something that she asked me to do. When it comes to hunting, when you have kids, I think you're all excited about, gosh, I can't wait till I get to take them out. But Hill and my wife, Hill, and myself, we had a lot of conversations, and I couldn't care less if my kids hunt. I don't care. Great if they do, we'll have some fun with it. But definitely made it a point not to push it on them too early. I think doing that, you can spoil them, number one. And they don't respect it as much. I know my father, like when I was real young, like he held out on me. Like he would go to these trips, and all I'd get to do is hear about them. So he actually wasn't taking me, on those trips prior to me getting my hunter safety card and all that jazz. But just hearing the stories, having him gone for the weekend, come back Sunday night, hearing the stories about he's, chasing this here and there or whatever, and all these hikes, that amped me up and it got me excited about wanting to do it. Who knows what would have happened if you would have been taking me out on those trips and I would have just gotten spoiled as a youth. I don't know. But it was definitely a concern when we had kids. Like, definitely not going to push it on them. If they see something in it from the stories that I tell them, and they want to come out and do it, great, we'll go do it. But for example, like my daughter, when she was 8, she did a hunt with me. We were going out for a hike. I had a bear tag in my pocket, and I turned this into a bear hunt, I guess. I wasn't really sure how far we'd get on this trip. We were going to do some berry picking, and she's got her little list of things she wants to check off, her little treasure list, checklist, things she wants to see. So we had a goal to do that, but I also had a bear tag in my pocket. And so we hiked way up in there, and we ended up doing just over 9 miles that one day. She's 8 years old, so there's a lot of coaxing, a lot of snacks, and a lot of conversations to keep her mind off of it. And the little, checklist of things that she wanted to see kept her focused as well. Like, oh, we got to find, a certain feather or hawk feather. We got to see a mountain ghost. We got to get up there. Just all these little things that kept her mind going. Well, long story short, we ended up getting a great bear. And then she got to see that whole process. She got to see me shoot it, and we broke it down, and she got to pack a little bit out, and we got to do the night hike coming out of there. She did 20 miles in 2 days for an 8-year-old. So
that's impressive.
Yeah, she did very, very well. And I felt like, geez, I might have overdone it just because of how far it was. But it was a couple years later, she came to me and asked me about wanting to come do a hunt. And thought, well, I will make this the best possible scenario for you. Try to keep it comfortable and no pressure. It's all her. So then you get to have that fun experience of, like, teaching them how to shoot a rifle really well. And you get to spend, the end of the days out there, an hour here, an hour there, working with them on the rifle. And that was fun. And she's just one heck of a shot. I think ladies in general are just incredible shots. They're better than we are. But she took to that, and she doesn't know what missing is like because she never misses anything that she's shooting at, target or otherwise. And we set that trip up, and definitely, my wheels were turning how I wanted this hunt to go, praying for not the worst of weather. You don't want to ruin them with some cruddy weather. And we went out, and she crushed that hunt, and she did well, and she got to pick out the deer she wanted, and we didn't force anything on her. I mean, she could have not pulled the trigger on anything. It still would have been a success. My wife came with us on that one, and it was just a great trip. And yeah, we made a video of it, and it's pretty cool to see what happens in the end after she does, pass on a buck that maybe most first hunters would take. It was for sure. And then she ended up getting this old, buck that I'd seen the prior year, and he was already a regress that prior year. So now he was even another year regressed, and just a cool old buck to take. And she did incredibly well, made a perfect shot.
Now she's ruined for the rest of her hunting career.
Yeah. Well, and fast forward to this last season, we did a similar hunt, and she just crushed it. Really, another nice big mature mule deer, and she passed on quite a few bucks on that trip, and came down to the end, and she, very last day, and she hammered a really nice buck. But I think for I have a 7-year-old as well. I don't know if she's going to take to hunting. No idea. Don't care. But what we do a lot of, and is we go out and do these short trips, just these fun little trips. And hunting isn't necessarily the reason we're going out there. We're just going for a walk on the river. But then, we'll inevitably take, a little, whether it's a pistol or a 22 or a shotgun, and we'll do these little trips for porcupines. Porcupines and bunnies are hunts that are so easy for the kids.
And
And
people don't realize this, and I figured this out just from following your stuff, that you can eat porcupine meat in a stew.
oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, no, they're great. They're real fatty. If you go back, like the mountain men used to love porcupines because they're high fat, number one. They don't even need a bullet if you don't want them. I mean, they're slow as molasses and they don't run from you. So um, we've taken on the porcupine hunts. Back in Washington State, we had these Russian olives that were everywhere. We'd find porcupines all the time. So we started taking them with the kids and bringing them back. Skinning them out, dropping them in a crock pot, and just making these really nice fatty stews. And that's just the tradition now. So every Christmas Eve we go out and do porcupine hunts, and then New Year's we do some porcupine hunts, just local stuff. And we always get a porky or two, and yeah, we cook them up, make a meal, and a real easy kind of fun hunt for kids. It's not physically demanding. You get to see a lot of stuff, walking river bottoms, and you're looking for like chew marks on the trees, and then you're getting close to a porcupine, so the kids get excited, and you get to show them buck rubs and just all kinds of stuff. It's just a good learning lesson being in river bottoms in the wintertime, tracking things in the snow and stuff like that. So it's not really a big hunt, but my youngest daughter, she has done enough of those little hunts that she's getting excited about maybe doing what her big sister has done and go out and get a deer sometime or a bear or something like that. So
That's awesome. And there's some nuggets in there that I want to point out too, because, I've noticed this too with the kids, and my youngest son is very, what would be classified as ADHD. He's very high energy, high intelligence, wants to question everything. And so I'm trying not to get that out of him, because one day that's going to be beneficial, but right now it's annoying. And so, but I love what you said about having a checklist. Now, is that something she came up with, or did you suggest it and she put the list up, or how did you guys work that out?
No, I suggested it,
Okay.
just thinking ahead, like what is going to keep her mind going forward.
Yeah.
You know, so I wish I remembered everything on the checklist, the little, you know, treasure hunt list that I made for her. But yeah, it was seeing certain things. It was, catching a cutthroat, picking huckleberries, a certain shaped rock, just seeing a bear, all these different things. There's like 20 things on the list, and we checked almost every box on this long extended hike in. So kept her mind working, thinking
Yeah.
ahead. That plus snacks, and your kids can go probably farther than you think.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah, I didn't even think about the checklist. We've done like geocaching things when we go on hikes that are kind of better trails, and the kids love that. But definitely snacks and water is another big thing too that I've noticed. But that checklist, that's a golden nugget right there. I
yeah,
love that. For any of you guys out there with kids, that's something that you should definitely, and obviously have them. I mean, you knew the area, right? So you were kind of guiding the checklist, but she helped make it. So have the kids help contribute, because like maybe something you think they'd be interested in, they're not interested in finding, but
right.
kind of give some ideas and get their brain working. So I think that's awesome. That's a really good idea.
Yeah, and one thing that we've added lately with my little 7-year-old is we just put a camera in her hand, and so I gave her an old Canon camera, and she carries that around her neck, and she's now constantly looking ahead at things. There's a flower, or there's a chipmunk, or whatever. So keeps her really like her mind going and busy, and not just the monotonous,
Mm-hmm.
hike down a trail that we're all accustomed to. But boy, I tell you, the camera thing has been real slick, getting my daughter to hike miles with us, because she's always looking for something cool, whether it's like an old cabin in the woods, or how a tree lays out or whatever. And so she's snapping shots constantly. Now
That's
it's
really
not
cool.
the quickest way up the mountain by any stretch,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of photos getting taken, but she loves it.
So that's where you get your Instagram content from, right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, definitely not my skills with the camera.
That's awesome. Well, that's really cool. I love hearing about that because again, that's the side that a lot of people don't see. Like you guys put out some amazing videos, but I'm always interested in like how do you balance that out with family life? Because there never really is a true balance. I love that idea of tipping the scales, during hunting season when you're gone for so much, you're obviously not putting a ton of time into your family. But when
Yeah.
you're home, you're there and you're present, you're 100%, and you're not forcing them to do stuff that they don't want to do. They just see that dad's doing these awesome things. I want to try it too.
Yeah.
And these little small kind of coaxing or guiding to see what they like without, because if you force a kid to do anything, it never ends well. And whether
Yeah.
that's making them eat dinner
Yeah.
or read a book they don't want to read or go out
Well,
and
I tell you, like, I got opinions on that. Like, there's certain things, like hunting and fishing, I don't force anything on them. But I will say, I still want my kids to do hard things. Like, for example, track. Um, she's involved in track. Now, there's some events that she hates. They're hard events because they
hmm
make the body hurt. Like a run in the mile, hates it. So
hmm
I make her do it because she can do she can do the other events, the high jump and the hurdles and stuff with ease and not even hardly break a sweat. It's easy for her. But I I want to make her do hard things that she has to kind of prepare for and keep up with. So if she's not running the mile throughout the summer, it's really going to suck come track season again.
hmm
And so there's a few things that I force her to do just because they're a little bit uncomfortable. But definitely when it comes to fun things like hunting, fishing, and those type things, I want to kind of play at her speed for those.
Right. Yeah. And I definitely agree with that as well. That there's certain things, and it's not that you're forcing them necessarily, and maybe it feels like that at the time, but you're showing them what they're capable of because that's what they're capable of, right?
Yeah,
Hunting, fishing, that's definitely a hobby, but something that they've already shown interest in, like track. You're like, well, let's push it a little bit further, right?
sure.
And so I definitely agree with you on that. That's something that us as parents, like I think a lot of people have that misconception that we're supposed to be their best friend, and
Mm.
that's not your job. And I
No,
remind my kids of that whenever I'm coming. I turn to mean dad, and that's what they call it, is mean dad. And when I make them do stuff that they don't necessarily want to do, like clean up from dinner, right? I want my kids to leave this house knowing that boys do house chores just like girls do, right? Like
mhm.
that's going to make a healthy marriage down the road.
Yeah,
And even before that, it's going to make happy roommates, right? So
right.
stuff like that. And that's stuff that isn't fun. That's the unfun part of parenting. But it definitely, your kids will look back on that later, and they'll say, I appreciate that dad or mom pushed me a little bit further than what my comfort zone is. Because let's be honest, if everyone wanted to be comfortable, you just sit back and play video games or scroll through TikTok, Instagram, all that all day. And that wouldn't create any sort of society for anyone. So,
No,
so
so
that
much
that's
more to
great.
life than that, than
Exactly.
video games and the phones for sure. We got a lot of good opportunities out there these days, and all these kids, it's man. I mean, they got it much better than we did with as far as just opportunities. And when we moved here to Montana, I feel like it's a giant playground. We can end of the day after work just zip down and canoe down one of the local rivers here and just grab a few miles doing that. See a lot of wildlife and things like that. And yeah, we try to choose that every time over don't do the video game stuff, and try to avoid that as much as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the only time my kids get screen time is like right now when I need them to be quiet and out of my hair.
Yeah. Oh
I'm
yeah.
like,
Sure. Oh yeah. Well,
um,
we use them for sure, like long drives,
yep.
especially from driving
He's
back to.
looking out my window. Oh
Yeah.
man. That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about what you're passionate about
Mhm.
outside of family, homemaking, and now what the season that's coming up here soon. What are some maybe some hunts that you're looking forward to, or maybe a hunt or two that you'd like to highlight that you really enjoyed in the past?
Gosh, every season is a little bit different, and man, Jonathan, I am very fortunate to be able to take the time these days and do all these trips. We didn't used to be the case. Used to have to really fight for time. Holding down the business and all that. And somehow, some way, I found myself in a position where I got much more time to spend in the mountains, which is great. But I like what you said, when you have a family, um, if you do spend as much time as, 100 plus days like I do on the mountain, you sure as heck better be present with your kids when you are home. Um, trying to avoid the phone yourself and doing all that and just spending as many, having as many experiences as you can. And we are very fortunate living here to be able to do that. So I don't feel like I'm shorting my kids on activities or fun, even though I am gone a lot in the fall season. This year lays out definitely way different than last year. Last year, somehow, I found myself with too many elk tags in my pockets. Just one of those years where I had my home state tag of Montana, and then, I drew a couple others, and that wasn't expected. And so there was a lot of elk hunting last year, early archery stuff. And then this year, my daughter expressed that she wanted to try to get her first bear. So we have changed basically a lot to kind of dedicate our time to looking for her first fall bear. So we're gonna carve out a couple weeks while she's out of school, and we're gonna go chase bears and see what we can do. Great time with the kids, in August, where you can catch some fish and there's some high mountain lakes. Who knows where the berries are going to be this year, if they're going to be ripe or not. Everything's a little late with the snowpack, but so we got a couple weeks spent with her trying to tag some fall bears, which is one of my favorite hunts, one of my favorite meats. One of my favorite meals is just bear, period.
Mm-hmm.
But then you add on the fall bear aspect. Usually they're pretty carb loaded in the fall versus the spring. So you get a lot of, that fat that you can play with and render and all that jazz and jar up, put that in your mason jars. So that's a cool aspect of the fall hunt as well. And after that, decided to go to Alaska. We're taking a trip to Alaska for some moose and caribou this year, which has always been something I just put on the back burner. I've never myself hunted moose in Alaska or caribou. Always so focused on just all the over-the-counter stuff here, between Idaho, Montana. But this year, finally decided out nobody's going to pull my tag for one of these oil once-in-a-lifetime moose tags. So I'm going to go up there, and my buddy and I are going to head up and just grab our tags once we get up there and go do a float and hunt moose and caribou. And that chews up a lot of September, so there's not going to be a whole lot in the way of elk hunting this year. Now we do have, Montana gives us till the mid part of October to chase them around with a bow. So we'll have some October time to go chase elk with the bow, which is always fun. And then after that, after Montana elk season, it turns to high country mule deer with the rifle, and we try to get as adventurous as possible when we do those hunts. And I'll be honest, I think when I look at the early archery stuff is awesome. Love chasing velvet bucks in the high country early. Elk season is awesome. Love elk hunting. It screaming, bull screaming in, up close and personal.
I'm talking about up close and personal real quick. That little 4-yard shot that you just put out, that video. Oh my gosh. He could have licked your arrow, man.
Right there. Yeah, that was a great hunt. Real close shot. That made it easy. But then you look at, the late season stuff, which I consider just chasing old mature mule deer in the high country. I love that time of year. The weather's nasty. Hopefully it's nasty. Cold temps, and you got bucks coming off the tops of the mountains and those real, secluded areas. You get these migrations, and I just love everything that late season brings. I feel like it's the most challenging hunt that I'm going to do all year. It far outperforms the early archery mule deer hunts with a bow, in my opinion, when it comes to difficulty, challenge, you're facing weather conditions that you don't tend to face in August or September. And I like everything about it. Sometimes you go in and it's 60 degrees and you come out and it's minus 15 degrees. Things just change drastically. So every year, I would say if there's a couple of hunts that I look forward to the most, besides the one with my daughter this year, as we look, to try to take her first bear, those late season mule deer hunts with a rifle in my hand are probably my favorite.
You beat me to the question because I was gonna ask you that. Knowing the answer, I mean, I think you've expressed it multiple times in videos and posts that I've seen. But that seems to be your kind of your go-to, and I don't know if it's funny to me because you see, going back to kind of the different groups of people, you see people that absolutely love mule deer, you see people that absolutely love elk, right?
Sure.
And I'm somewhere in between right now, personally, because I haven't had enough experience with the late season high country rifle, mule deer, that which it seems like people like yourself that are super, that they just really enjoy the mule deer hunts. That's the time of year that they
Mhm.
love it,
Yeah.
versus archery elk. And for me, being so big into bows right now, that's kind of where I'm leaning, because I love that interaction with the elk. They're just big, majestic creatures that it pisses me off that they can walk through brush and not make a sound. Yet I'm
Yeah.
over here a quarter of their weight walking through, and I make a step and I make all the sound in the world.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at right now. But I know eventually I'd love to do hunts like that, where you go up in the late season and you just glass and you find those old crusty mule deer bucks that are just up there that you guys seem to portray so well. I mean, your videography, photography stuff that you guys do, it makes you feel like you're in camp
Mhm.
when you're watching those videos. I think it's awesome what you guys do up there. But so, is there something specific about? I mean, you mentioned some other things about the hunt, but
Mhm.
mule deer in general that you love so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny, like we all joke around, hope nobody takes it too seriously when we say, mule deer are the best, even though they are. It's half joking. We all love elk hunting, love bear hunting. And I don't whitetail hunt, but I do make fun of whitetail hunters all the time. But again, it's just in jest. I'm
I
just,
couldn't see you sitting in a tree stand. Like
no, I
I just,
couldn't. That's why I make fun of whitetail hunter or over water. Um, it's just not something that would
you're
probably,
gonna come up with the way to spot and stalk whitetail. That's your
yeah,
next adventure.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. Because the problem is, Jonathan, is on that day that I'm spotting and stalking whitetail, I should probably be spotting and stalking a mule deer, which are
Oh,
way cooler.
well, yeah, that's different. Yeah.
But yeah, like elk hunting, for example. I mean, who doesn't love the rush of elk hunting? And I cut my teeth in calling in elk in places like North Idaho, thick
Mm,
country, like you mentioned. They can be 5 yards in front of you. You can still hardly see but a patch of brown, and those thick alders and just dense type country. That's a ton of fun. And man, it's, having a bull screaming in is a blast. Now, I think when it comes to mule deer, if I was to put them on this this list of like what's going to be the hardest, most challenging, and bring you to the best of places, like the top of the hill, the gnarliest and nastiest of places that get you all puckered up at times. It's going to be mule deer every time. I feel like they're just, especially the old crusty ones. The old mature bucks. I feel like they are the hardest to locate and then take, whether that's with a bow or a rifle. Um, Much harder than elk. It can irritate elk hunters, but I feel like elk hunting with a bow is so much easier. So
Uh-oh,
much
some people are
easier.
gonna get real pissed about that.
Oh yeah, look, they're vocal. They come to you.
Hmm.
It's just not as difficult as going and trying to find a real mature animal in the high country, in the rocks, in the crags, low density. Um, you're going to have a war with your head at times in those type places, because sometimes you'll go days without seeing anything, and sometimes the fog will come in, and you're basically just sitting there with your thoughts, trying to wait out the weather. So it's just a challenge thing, I think. I love how they are, especially the old ones, you know, very reclusive. You know, they're antisocial like I am antisocial. They're they're very introverted, I feel like. Um, those real old high country bucks that live in the nastiest of places. And there's a little window where you get this opportunity to go try to find them, where they'll put themselves in killable areas, and you know that's like the migrations or the rut time frame and all that. And I just love everything about the hunt. The country that you end up finding yourself in is gnarlier than any elk hunt that I've ever been on. And again, don't get too pissed off, you elk hunters. I love elk hunting. I absolutely love it. But if I was to pick one, it'd definitely be mule deer. I just love the nature of everything about them, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and I think especially here where there's so many of them and they seem to be so dumb most of the year,
Yeah.
it's hard for me to see that until you. And again, those are all the young bucks, right? And does that are just walking around the city. I mean, I could have run 3 2-pointers over the other day, super
Yeah.
easy, and I
Yeah.
got out and took pictures because they're beautiful creatures, but you just see so many of them versus elk, at least
Mhm.
where I live. It's a different animal completely, but I can see that allure of the struggle of getting up there and maybe not seeing elk or deer for days, and you're up there in the cold, you're dealing with different temperatures and weather conditions, and the food's running low, stuff like that. And you seem to enjoy the struggle. You seem to
Mhm.
go out and find that challenge, and I think that's awesome. Has it always been like that for you, that you've gone after challenge and struggle, or is that something that's come on as hunting's gotten a little easier for you?
No, I think it's always been there. I don't know where it came from. I guess my dad, he brought me out on my first mule deer hunt. I was very young, and he brought me into a wilderness area that was very nasty, and he let me go. And I went off and I killed a buck. I killed my first 4-point buck on that trip. And he was nowhere to be found. And I ended up getting way lost, like way lost. Probably should have died lost. Probably not the best parenting that day, but I rolled back, I think 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, found my way back with the help of a drop camp that I happened to come across in a snowstorm. So it was a weird first deer, but my first deer came way back deep into this wilderness area that that I hadn't known, much of. And then from there it was always, well, I just got to try to beat that. And so always just going a little bit deeper and finding these little secluded pockets. It's always been a ton of fun and challenging yourself. And that goes with bear hunting. Elk hunting is the same way. You know, there's places in Washington on the coast where you don't have to make it this epic adventure. You can go out and call in bulls and shoot young bulls often. And then there's these other places where it's a ton of work, and to the point of you probably need a packer, or you need 2 or 3 guys on speed dial that will be able to come help you out.
Or
And
llamas?
so I went the way of like a packer. Like I will track down someone with horses because I'm 9 or 10 miles in and I don't know for sure if I'll be able to get a buddy in here. So I did that for years, and just um, found myself in areas. When you did that, you find yourself in areas where just people don't tend to go. And so you're hunting elk that aren't pressured. So it makes it a lot easier. You don't have to be the best elk hunter in the world to kill good bulls, unpressured bulls. Um, and that's what I always focused on, was just finding those unpressured animals. And that tends to bring you quite a few miles into the backcountry at times. But yeah, it's always been like that. I can't stand truck hunting or hunting too close to a trail. Something feels weird, or if you're seeing a lot of boot tracks or whatever, just doesn't feel quite right. Like you haven't earned it yet. So yeah, I don't know when, but I think that must have came from my dad. Just out of the gates, brought me into some pretty wild places.
That's really awesome. That's cool story. And yes, I would agree. It's probably not the best parenting practice, especially nowadays.
Oh,
Yeah. you probably have a lot of people on your back if you dropped a kid off with a rifle
Yeah.
and said go kill a buck. And
I
and you
I
probably
remember
wouldn't even
standing
want
over
to
that
do that.
deer. I was looking at that deer and I had no idea what to do. No idea what to do because my dad wasn't there and I'd never killed him before.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a mess. I ended up cutting the neck off that thing. Like, I found a way to drop the guts and I cut the neck off and I carried that thing like I didn't know to go all the way up to the base of the
Mm.
skull and shave weight and all that. It was just dumb mistakes, but I carried that thing the wrong direction for miles and miles and miles.
You imagine
So,
walking in what the people thought walking into that camp. They're
uh,
like, what's this kid doing?
they couldn't believe it. Like they didn't want me to. Like they showed me a map of where I was. I was
Mhm.
14 years old, so
Mhm.
I didn't know much of anything. And this is way before GPS units. There's no
Yeah,
cell
yeah.
phone. This was a long time ago. And so it was a map and a little mag light. I didn't have a light, so they gave me a mag light, which was pretty popular at the time, and showed me on a map where I was.
Weighs like
Yeah,
10 pounds, right?
oh yeah, I carried that big old heavy deer head, for way too many miles. But in the end, it
That's
worked
awesome.
out.
Yeah, obviously you're here.
Yeah, yeah,
But that's awesome, man. That's really cool. Well, I don't want to keep you too much longer. I really do appreciate your time. I just wanted to ask you if you, for anyone that may not know who you are, or even the people that do know who you are, do you have any uh recommendations or anything as far as being a parent, and then maybe even in the hunting side of things that you'd go into this year?
yeah. Gosh, being a parent, um, I think the approach that I've taken has worked somehow with two young daughters. Just trying to get them out, telling your stories when they're not able to go with excitement, and get them interested in it somehow. And I think that's been something that's got my kids into it. It worked for me with my father, and somehow, some way, I have two young daughters that when I ask them if we want to go hit the river and walk the bottoms for porkies or bunnies, they want to go and go do it. And I think just making it not too difficult in the beginning, um, tons and tons of snacks, and then keeping their mind focused on something else other than hunting. You're doing a lot of the hunting and looking, but you're also trying to get them into it and asking them questions like, what made that there? Like, is that a buck rub? Is that an elk rub? Is that what scat is this? What kind of track is this? Always looking for stuff to keep them getting educated to what's going on out there. And I've noticed, if we bring a friend, my kids are very educated on all things tracks and animals and scat, know what to look for and know where to look. But then there's kids that don't have a hunter in the group or in their family. Father doesn't hunt, and this is stuff that is so foreign to them. They have no idea, and so they get an education when they come with us. But yeah, we take a lot of their friends out with us and kind of get them introed into it as well. And
That's awesome.
I don't know if I have any good advice. I'm just doing what's worked, and somehow I have two girls that are taken to it. One that's well on her way, and what started with she's taken a couple of great mule deer bucks is now turning into a fall bear hunt, which will turn into an elk hunt, a fall elk hunt as well. And um, I'm not trying to throw a bunch of tags at her in any given year, but just let her go at her progression. This year she really wanted to get a bear, and that's what we're going to do.
That's awesome. And for any new hunters out there, maybe any words of advice other than dropping your 14-year-old off in the wilderness and
Yeah, don't do that for sure. Yeah, probably want to be a little bit more careful. But yeah, I don't know as far as advice. I think trying to get kids into the outdoors is really, really important. It's something my wife and I have taken on as a challenge, recognizing that there's a lot of people that don't have mentors growing up. And so without, a parent who's into the outdoors, it's very easy to, well, get in trouble. Number one,
Mhm.
get into things you probably that aren't going to suit you. and then just be, I'll just say it, on the wrong side of conservation, on the wrong side of what we do. And it's easy to see how if there's a kid raised in a non-hunting family, why they're going to vote the way they do in the future. So, I think educating as many people as possible to this thing, showing it to them. We do our Western hunting summits every year, and it's pretty cool to see, a lot of the adult guys just getting into hunting, grown-ups just getting into hunting. So we're kind of showing them this thing that's important and valuable, and in turn they bring their kids into it. They get interested, and it's just this good cycle. And I think it's really important that we don't hide hunting, and try to cut off those that are interested in it. But bringing folks in is very important for our future. The way things are going, I think we need more people on our side. So, I recommend trying to get new guys out. Dedicate a little bit of your season to showing, somebody who's never done it, or someone who's just shown a little interest in it, taking them out, whether they hunt or not. At least have them come with you, and they understand it, and maybe they won't try to turn it off in the future. Maybe they'll actually be okay with it.
That's exactly how I got into it. A buddy of mine invited me just to go with him. I was like, sure. And then I ended up just getting hooked, and I started doing all the work of, researching rifles and tag allocations and all this other stuff. And he's like, I've taken so many people out, and it's awesome to see when it clicks. And they, like, for me, I delve into it and want to do all the work. And I go out and I start spotting animals that he wasn't seeing, and stuff like that. And so it is definitely a progression. I love that idea of taking people out, taking a little portion of your season. Don't take them on the November hunts that you go. Take them on maybe like a little porcupine hunt or an early season mule deer hunt, something like that, and get them out, and it definitely something will click with at least one of those people. And that's awesome. I appreciate that. Well, thanks again, Ryan, for your time. I really appreciate it. It was good chatting with you. And where can people find you if they want to look you up, or your company, Stealthy Hunter?
Yeah, we got the website, stealthyhunter.com. It's just got products. My wife and I we've got multiple businesses going on. We also run a podcast, and that's the Hunt Harvest Health podcast. I'm not too involved in that one. It's more my wife. She's the brains. She's a doctor that knows a lot. I'm just a dumb hunter that likes to hunt. So I contribute to that as much as possible. But other than that, the old IG Stealthy Hunter, I'm on there, and then I try to respond. I don't do a whole lot on the social media. I go in spurts, I guess. But that's awesome. That's where you can find me. But
cool. Yep. I'll leave those links down below, guys. Again, thanks, Ryan, for hopping on here. And guys, as I always say, get out, live your life, and love it.